everybody, welcome to our third workshop. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to get started on this workshop. I think you all are going to enjoy our guest speaker this evening. I think gonna learn a lot. Our topic of our workshop this evening is on the topic of how do I prepare for a professional interview. So you're going into the interview, maybe you've gone to career fairs, maybe your mentors hooked you up and connected you with someone at their company, maybe you've gotten some referrals somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. You are about to step into the interview. Maybe you've already had interviews before. This workshop is about how to think about interviews differently. We're bringing in guest speakers who are experts on this topic from around the world to give you insight and wisdom on how to make the most out of the professional interview. So this workshop is going to be about 45 minutes long with, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the workshop. I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the workshop, which I'll have you answer. That's how you get credit for being here. You're now midway through the program so far. You should have already had your first conversation with your mentor. Hopefully you've already started setting up your second conversation with your mentor. If you have not, or you're struggling to get in touch with your mentor, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We need to take care of you so then you can get connected and make the most out of this program. So really, this program is all about how can you prepare for the first professional interview. Really, what you're selling your interviewer on is your ability, essentially your future potential opportunity. Essentially, you are selling them on your potential, because at the end of the day, people are not expecting you to come in and be the expert on XYZ topic. They are expecting you to be a willing learner and someone that's eager to gain knowledge and to be a better professional. If you can convey that, you will get the opportunity. But it will be competitive, especially in highly competitive industries. And I know that anybody that's in this program is more likely than not going into a career that's competitive. I mean, you would not have gotten a mentor had you not wanted to take your level, take your career, take your life to the next level. So with that said, I want to encourage you to keep your head up, keep applying, put yourself out there for more opportunities, and leverage the insight and knowledge that you're getting in these workshops to make yourself and to help you better prepare yourself for the interview. Now, before we get started into our main program, I want to ask you a quick question, and that question is, when it comes to the interview, how do you want people to feel about you? In other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when you are in an interview? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that, because I think if we are more intentional about how we want other people to feel about us in the interview, our likelihood of actually having that happen increases substantially. I mean, I've talked about in past workshops, strategy, story, state, which I will talk about in a moment, but this is a really big part of the story part. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Now, I think sometimes we can interpret that as psyching ourselves up, getting ourselves confident, getting ourselves pumped for why we're going to be successful. And I think that's great. But I think if we could take it to another level, that being intentional about how we want other people to perceive us. So if we want them to perceive us as confident, or if we want them to perceive us as knowledgeable, or if we want them to perceive us as eager to learn and having potential, it could be a variety of things. But what I really want you to do is I really want you to identify feelings that you want other people to feel about you when you enter their world. Because you can be intentional about that. Your likelihood of having them actually feel that is much greater. But if you don't set the intention, you have no idea how they're going to feel about you. You've got really no control over it. But if you intentionally think to yourself, I want people to think of me as confident. Okay, what am I going to do that's going to convey and convey confidence? Really, it's all about whatever that feeling you want to convey. Make sure that you are taking actions and being intentional about ensuring that other people view you that way, and that you come in trying to actively think about actions that you can take that will help other people perceive you in that light. So let's start under the next part of our workshop. Now, I've talked about this in the past before, and I've talked about this in previous workshops, but one of the big things that I always love to stress is the 3 keys to success in the program. There are 3 of them. That is your strategy, that is your story, that is your state. I bring it up every single time because it is that important. And the reason why it's important is because if we are not honing our strategy, honing our story, honing our state, we are not setting ourselves up for successful. If we let someone else drive our roadmap for us, we could end up in a location that we do not want to be. But if we are intentional about our story, if we're intentional about our strategy, if we're intentional about our state, we are much more likely to get to where we would like to go. It's kind of like the law of attraction. When we put it out there, and we put it out to more people, and we're more intentional about what we want to accomplish, and we're more intentional about how we are going to convey our bodies and ourselves to other people, the likelihood that it comes back to us is much greater. So I want to talk about state. State is the most important thing. Like physically, where are you at in your life, in your world? What is going on? I don't care how stressed you are. I don't care how mad you are. I don't care how dejected you are. I don't care of anything negative going on in your world. If you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, especially for the interview, you will be successful. I'm a big proponent of power poses. I'm a big proponent of screaming at the top of your lungs and dancing out. In fact, I'd like to do that with you right now. So for the next 30 seconds, what I like you to do is I like you to stand up. I like you to shimmy it out. I like you to shake it out. I like you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just scream at the top of your lungs at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go, because you've got nothing to lose. I don't care if it's a popularity contest. I don't care if you're in a library. I don't care if you're in a house. What do you have to lose? This is not a coolness effort here. It's about making an impact and preparing yourself physically for being successful. What is the price of success? Getting yourself into a state conducive for being successful. Maybe looking a little weird to some of your colleagues, coworkers, or peers, but what is that cost to you in the long run? Nothing. They're going to say, hey, what were you doing? Why were you dancing? Why were you screaming at the top of your lungs? You say, hey, I'm getting myself in a state conducive for being successful. Maybe they've never heard about it before. Maybe they've never learned. You can educate them on this. So don't worry about how other people are perceiving you when you are going to get yourself into a state that's going to level up your game, especially when it comes to the interview. Now, you may not want to do this in the office of a business that you are about to interview in, but you could certainly do it in the bathroom, in a bathroom stall. Get yourself into a 2-minute power pose. Stand up like Superman or Superwoman, or put your arms out like as if you're a star. There's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, but you should be doing something, because if you're not, you are letting the way that other people perceive you essentially come up to chance. And you don't want to chance it, especially for the opportunity of a lifetime. And you have no idea which opportunity is the opportunity of a lifetime. It may not be this job. It could be the next one. If you make a positive impression in an interview and you may not land that job, that interviewer could have really loved how you interviewed, and that person may not be at that company for forever, or they might be, and they might come up with a new job. They might reach out to you personally to have you come and interview. It's all about the relationship. It's all about how they perceive you. It's all about that impression you leave. Your state is critical. Now, what is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be successful? This is something we kind of did earlier when I asked you, how do you want other people to feel about you in the interview? This is a great exercise to prepare yourself for a professional interview. If you are intentional about how you want other people to feel about you, you are going to put yourself into a position to succeed, because then you're much more likely to manifest that outcome. Literally, law of attraction, putting it out there. I want other people to feel XYZ about me. Confident, smart, intelligent, well prepared. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's a weakness that you have, but you like to have them perceive it as a strength. Maybe it's a strength that you have that you'd really like to amplify even as a greater strength. Doesn't matter, but set an intention of something. Because if you don't set an intention of something, it could be wild in terms of what they actually perceive of you. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things that you're going to do to make the most out of this interview? Are you going to come prepared with questions? Are you going to come prepared with doing background research on the company? Are you going to make an intentional, focused effort on taking notes during the conversation, so then you're asking poignant, direct questions to the interviewer that are relevant about his or her life? Are you going to do the things that you need to do to be the most successful in an interview, or are you not? So the strategies you're going to learn from our guest speaker later on in this workshop, I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say. But before we jump into our guest speaker, I want to talk about one final thing, and that is getting yourself into a routine that can help you prepare for an interview. One of the things that I like to do, have an accountability partner. This could be it could be anybody. But what you want to do with your accountability is you want to share with your accountability partner 3 things that you learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to that internship or job. What this does, and you might think this sounds silly, you might think this sounds crazy, it could be another student in the program, it could be a friend of yours, does not matter. But what we've learned, what we've observed is that students who land jobs and internships through this program are substantially more likely to actually land that job and internship if they told other people about their experience. One of the questions we ask at the end of the question is, on average, how many other people did you tell about your experience in the program? What we ended up learning was that when a student told 20 or more people about their experience in Ambition in Motion, their likelihood of also landing their job and internship was substantially higher than students who didn't. There's a direct correlation to you telling more people about your experience and what you're learning in this program to actually landing the outcomes you like than not. So I want to challenge you to identify an accountability partner. Share with them 3 things that you've learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to help you get closer to landing that job or internship. If you don't mind being an ambassador for this program and helping encourage other students to get involved and take advantage of this, I would greatly appreciate it, because it would help us make a bigger impact on more people, which is really what our goal is. So let's jump into our workshop. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker. I'm so excited to transition into this next part of the workshop. Remember to answer the 3 questions that we asked during the workshop. That's how you get credit for being here within 24 hours of the workshop going live. If you got any questions, any concerns, any issues with anything at all, please email support@envision-in-motion.com. We will answer those questions, concerns, and issues. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to dive into our workshop for this evening. We've got a great topic here, and we've got a great guest speaker for us to talk about how to prepare for the interview. So there's probably a lot of things going through your mind as you're thinking about, okay, what do I do to prepare for this interview, or what can I do to make myself stand out? Maybe there's a lot of other people applying for this role. What can I do that's unique and different? Or maybe you're encountering a scenario where you've got maybe multiple offers, or you're trying to decipher, how do I really interview the company to see if it's a fit for me? Oftentimes we may just think, okay, I'm just going to take whatever first offer I can get. And it's like, hold on a second. We don't want to put ourselves through a bunch of pain, trials, and tribulations because we made a poor employment decision. Fortunately, we've got a great guest speaker with us here this evening, Phillips. Damar is doing some amazing work as an executive in the HR space. He's done an incredible amount of interviews. He's interviewed candidates. He's interviewed 4 roles. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to how to prepare for the interview. Damar, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Garrett, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, Damar, maybe I kind of gave a brief high-level overview that you're an executive in HR, but do you mind just maybe giving a more formal overview of who you are?
Sure, absolutely. So, again, my name is Damar Phillips. I'm currently the Vice President of People Operations at Hyliion Incorporated. We are a Class 8 electrification company that deals in commercial vehicle space. And so it's a new startup organization, around 8 years old. We celebrated this year. And went public a few years ago. And so I'm excited about finding, people who have the entrepreneurial spirit, who are innovative and inventive, engineers primarily, but we have all other positions as well. And so thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of the insights with our students.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right in. Can you tell me your story? How did you get into Hyliion? How did you get into this role? What were some of the trials, tribulations that you faced in the interview process? So maybe when you were interviewing for your previous roles to then get to the next roles, how did they domino effect in the subsequent roles? And what were some mistakes that you made in the early days that maybe students can avoid? And what were some things that you did successfully that helped you land the roles that you've successfully landed?
Well, Garrett, that's a very loaded question. And so I may have to ask you to repeat some of that because there's a lot of power in that. And so I've moved to Texas about 5 years ago for a company, interviewed for a director of human resource position. Ironically, they found me, and it just was a fit at that time. And so that was kind of the lightning in a bottle. I had just left a place because of a family situation, and was looking to move into Texas. And lo and behold, the day that I decided to leave the company is the day that they reached out saying, hey, we have this opportunity. Are you interested? Can you come down and interview? Absolutely. And it was a marriage. That does not happen normally. That is, that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that you're going through a transition period. If you're in a job, you're getting ready to be either laid off because of reduction in force. COVID-19 had hit, so there was reductions happening all across the space, and employees were scared, one, for their personal safety. Businesses were scared for their livelihoods. And then, people decided what was important to them, whether it was going to stay home with their families or still continue trying to work. And so in that space, when you make a decision to leave a company or be let go, you're kind of in shell shock. Both of those decisions are tough decisions to try to navigate. You don't know what the next moment is going to be. So you do like anybody, you pull out the resume that you haven't touched up several years now, because most people don't update their resume as they go. You gain experience, you think about it, you want somebody to do it for you because it's not easy. No one can critique their own work. Uh, I know I can't. I can write a killer resume for you, but to try to narrow mine down to 1 to 2 pages as a vice president at this level, it's pretty difficult to do. And so you need help. And so don't hesitate asking someone to review what you've written down. You could be very wordy, you could have spelling errors throughout the whole process. You might not highlight the right skill. You might be downplaying what your experience truly is. And so having an independent set of eyes to be able to look at what you've done objectively, I think is the best part. So for what I've done, when I got that role and decided to leave, I did it because I wanted to gain different experiences in other things, such as health insurance, getting some of that experience. So I did that probably about 3 to 6 months before I started looking for another opportunity. And I just started applying, right? So LinkedIn is a great resource to be able to use to apply for roles. Make sure your resume is top notch before you do it because it's highly competitive. Those are professionals at every step of the way, right? Uh, other organizations like Glassdoor or Indeed, those are some reputable ones as well. And then ZipRecruiter, some of the hot jobs and some of the, other sites, Career Builder, they've kind of fallen down in some of their prestige to be able to get you jobs placed very quickly. And so focus on your LinkedIn profile, make sure that your work experience on your resume matches that. Make sure that your job titles are not too obliviated and just overblown, because during the interview process, a good talent acquisition specialist will be able to see right through what your job title says versus what your LinkedIn profile said and match those dates up pretty quickly. So you want to make sure not to overstate your experience in your roles because they will do some verification throughout the process. But early on, like my problem was I was just proliferating the market with I'm gonna apply for every role, click automatic apply, pop, 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 pop. And I didn't specify my resume to fit those jobs. And so I was canceling myself out because the specific skill sets that were required, while they were generally there, the amount of experience in the specific function or the specific expertise that was required for the role, I didn't have it. And so I was canceling myself out before by not slowing down in the process enough to make sure that I tailored something in my resume to fit that role and show some upward mobility as well. And so I think those were some of the early mistakes. I remember applying at one point, just because I was fed up in the place that I was, I probably applied for like 50 roles and probably got 3 phone calls, which isn't a very good ratio, and went through the process. And I'll share the story. It'd be very vulnerable with you guys. It was with an organization for a role that was lower than the role that I ended up receiving. It was a senior director role, and I ended up receiving a vice president role. My Twitter feed is what got me in trouble. And so you have to be mindful to set your Twitter feed to private if you don't want people going out to see whether you've commented on politics, because that's a no-no in the workplace. Social events, social experiences, those types of things can also be a area that they can knock you out. If they can find something to discontinue your candidacy, especially in a crowded field, that is very easy to do with those types of things. So if you have social media, make sure that you have your Facebook, your Twitters blocked, and then allow people access to your LinkedIn that is updated with correct information.
Yeah, man, that is a really you just shared so many different amazing tips here. First one, objectivity in the resume writing process. How many times have you looked at somebody's resume and they went wall to wall borders, no margin area, using 7-point font? You're like you're putting a monocle on to try to read
Right,
the script because you're like, all right, you know what? Not all of this needs to be in here, but it's difficult for you to be objective about yourself. But you
absolutely.
had, what you had shared was that most people don't update their resume during the entire employment process. It sounds
Right,
like that could be something that could be a very valuable tip. I guess
absolutely.
I'd be curious. I just want to ask the students a question. Post in the comments section. What are things that you can do to remind yourself to update your resume? And by the way, Tamar, how frequently should that be? Once a month, once a quarter, twice a year?
Well, and you don't have, you could do it quarterly, right? I
Yeah,
mean, every 90 days, you should have learned something, you should have grown in some area, and you should be demonstrating some level of skill that's required to do the job that you're currently in, as well as preparing for the job that you want in the future. And so I would say every 90 days is probably a good cadence to be able to go back and update your resume. I just updated my resume not too long ago, just because things are changing and the scope of the work that we're doing is changing. And so my skill set has increased during the year and a half that I've been at Hyliion. And so it's important to know that the resume that got you hired in your last job is not the resume that's going to get you hired in your next job.
I love it. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So, students, post in the comment section, what can you do to remind yourself to every 90 days, every 3 months, update your resume? Post in the comment section. I love to learn. So, Damar, you also brought up a great point about specifying your resume. There's this chat GPT has proliferated. I think a lot of people have become so excited and anxious all about it. And I've seen a lot of people go to chat GPT to write their cover letters, and it's just really generic and very vague. I've not seen too many people find that much success with it. And sure, it takes 30 seconds to run a query through ChatGPT, but ultimately, if it's not that personal, it's really like ChatGPT is good for some things, but when it comes to really being that needle in the haystack for a role, it doesn't seem to be the greatest move. The same with having your resume blasting the same one out to every job, even if it's totally different industries and fields. So, what can students do when maybe they've got a limited array of experiences to differentiate the resume based on the job itself?
Garrett, that's an excellent question. I believe the best thing that I would recommend is how do you personalize your passion in the resume or in the cover letter? How do you describe what you are motivated by to be successful within whatever role that it is within 2 or 3 paragraphs? Because the reality of today is typically cover letters aren't what's going to get you that job. However, it can throw you out if it's a requirement of the job application, right? So no one is going to just be super blown away about a cover letter unless you're trying to apply to an internship type of a program, which that's a way to just see how well the students truly write. Are their thoughts organized? Do they have a vision? Do they have a plan? But when you get to the executive level, I have yet to hire a senior level executive using a cover letter.
Mm, good insight. So,
You
what
know,
are
and
employers looking for when reviewing a person's resume or cover letter for like an early role? So, it sounds like from your perspective, a cover letter is just like, did you check that box? It shows me that you're paying attention, you got
that's right.
attention to detail.
Exactly. And that's really what they're looking for is attention to detail. Are you able to articulate a point of view and a perspective? Can you tell me why you want this opportunity and why our company should hire you? I think the interview is two ways, but the cover letter is really you trying to sell the organization on your skill sets, your abilities, and why you are a step above the other people who are applying for those roles. And so that's truly what the cover letter is. The resume needs to speak to your experience. You don't, and people get caught up, you don't have to have the exact experience, but it does need to be proximate to the role so that we can visualize you in the chair performing the function. And so if you're able to do that, then there's an opportunity for you to wow in person the people that are on the interview panel. Because today in today's session, that's going to be largely on Zoom or teams. And so it's kind of hard to be extremely personable behind a desk. But if you're invited on site, your personality can really shine through. How you interact with other employees that are there watching the process, and are you standing to shake people's hand? Common courtesy goes a long way in person. And then, did you dress for the part? I think nowadays everyone says business casual. Really? Like, we haven't gone that far to the left or to the right to say that's the only style that's there. However, you should dress appropriate to the industry in which you are interviewing, right? Uh, Ask the recruiter, is this a professional attire required, or is a sport coat and a collared shirt appropriate enough, or slacks, or button up shirt, something like that, to be comfortable in the interview. Because the main thing about the interview process is you have to be comfortable in your own skin and confident in your own abilities in order to sell someone on your confidence to do the job.
Yeah, I love that. And you don't want to be overdressed or underdressed. I think if you're going to err, you'd rather err on the side of being slightly overdressed, but you don't want to be too overdressed. I remember, do you ever watch The Office, Tamar?
Yeah.
You know that episode where Jim is dressed in like a tuxedo on the first day of his like new manager like being on the job, and he's like, "What are you doing? Is this a joke to you? Like, why are
Right.
you wearing a tuxedo to work?"
Exactly. And you, because and it also puts the other person's like, wow, I'm a little taken aback. I don't know how to start this with you looking like you do, right? And so
Yeah.
I think sometimes how you dress and how you prepare for work, after you get the job, you can relax some, right? But you should ask. If you're unsure, ask. Always err on the side of caution, which is asking for clarification. That goes with the interview as you're going through questions as well. Um, if you have concern or a follow-up question to, you're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. So I always like to command the room, right? Even if I'm the one that's on the table, I still need to make sure that the energy that's coming off in that room is one that I'm confident, not arrogant, that I know what I'm talking about because I have, the right skills, the requisite skills and abilities to communicate what I've done. And I can situationally answer the question using some of the experiences that I've had in prior roles. And so I think, making sure that you feel comfortable in your clothing, in your presentation, that's all a part of that.
I like that. And, oftentimes I find that the people who impress me the most and show me that they know more aren't doing it with the answers they give, but in fact, with the questions they ask during the interview process. I mean, do you agree, Damar? And if so, what are some questions students can ask to really show that they've done their homework, that they're interested in the role, and that ultimately they're prepared and the right candidate?
Yeah, I think so, right? I think the questions that I'm always blown away by is really the ones that are focused on the organizations and what we've put out, right? So as a publicly traded company, there's a lot of reports that are out there, whether it's financial reports, 10K filings about stock options and this and that that's out there. There's a lot of headlines that generate around earning releases, right? And so people who are engaged with, hey, what does your 3 to 5 year program look like? How many employees are you planning to hire in the next 2 to 3 years? Um, you know, why does your P&L look like it does, right? And that's not the exact question, but being more thoughtful around the P&L. If it's declining over several quarters or months, that might not be an organization that you want to join because it may not be going anywhere or be in existence for a period of time. So do your homework. Now, questions around social justice or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Those are very valid questions because not only do investors want to know that the company is a good steward of employees and of the community, but the employees are invested in that as well. So, what does your engagement scores look like? What does employee morale look like? And then when you start looking specifically at the job in and of itself, what's a day in the life of this person that I'm either replacing, or if this is a new role that I'll be doing? What does that look like? Because what you're trying to assess is expectations, right? Every organization will have a set of goals that it's trying to achieve. You need to understand your part in the overall organization, being able to accomplish the goals at hand so that the performance over the course of the year can be met. And so those are some of the things. I know it was pretty high level what I asked, but those are things that are important to me as an executive that does interviewing, but for my team as well.
That's great. No, I think this is fantastic. And I love what you shared about like doing the research on the company, especially if it's publicly traded. You know, especially, I mean, students may not necessarily have this context or insight, but if you can do this research, man, it can set you apart. Like if you were to say, hey, I've noticed that you have been able to increase your head count by this many over this time period in these different departments. Typically, based on other companies of similar sizes, when they've been able to do that, the next step is to increase headcount in XYZ area. So if you've increased headcount in sales over the last 3 months, typically the next step is to hire some headcount in technology or software.
Right.
Is that something that you see on your roadmap over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah.
That question would blow them away. It would
Oh,
be,
absolutely.
it would be like,
It,
you hear that, you're like, whoa. Like, I
that's
mean,
right.
yeah.
Very knowledgeable, right? Because the first thing that comes to mind, this person has done their research. They're very knowledgeable about the organization. They're asking intelligent questions. The flip side of that as well is if you notice that there's a lot of turnover. Hey, can you elaborate a little bit as to why the turnover seems to be so high? Are there programs that you guys are doing to help to turn that around? What does the future look like, right? Because you have someone that's thinking. A lot of these interviews is around critical thinking skills as well, situational leadership. Can you describe a time that you had to do X, Y, and Z, and make sure that, as you guys, you probably have heard the STAR method, but situation, task, action, and results. Make sure that the STAR program is how you answer your questions, right? Because a lot of times, 3 minutes or less on an answer is probably what you'll get, and then there's follow-up questions that take a little bit of time. So you might get 30 minutes in an initial interview. If you're coming on site, it's probably an hour to 4 hours, depending on how many people need to interact with you. But think about that.
Yeah, that's a great. I love the star method. I think the other big caveat there is don't ramble your star response. I've seen that happen before where students will go on a long story where it's just never ending. And now what should have been a 3 minute response ends up being a 5 to 10 minute response. And now we're only able to get through a portion of the questions the interviewers got. And therefore, if they're not able to get through the answers to their questions, you've already defaulted yourself. Like you've already put yourself in a poor position because they need to check the box that all 5 questions that they got have been answered. So I guess I'd love to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comments section. What is a question you'd like to ask in the interview process that's maybe different than what you've asked before? I'd love to learn it. Post in the comment section. But Tamar, yeah, did you have something to add on that?
Well, yeah. So I think, because the rambling just means that you can't kind of control your thought process, right? So uh, coming across to an interviewer, it could seem very sporadic, that your brain isn't very organized, and it just turns them off immediately.
Are there any other mistakes that applicants sometimes make that they should avoid? What are common mistakes that applicants make in the interview process they really should avoid?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think one thing that's kind of tricky is compensation. Asking about, well, how much does this role pay, or what I'd look like for a starting salary. You know, the time that it's okay to be able to inquire or provide that is when the recruiter is asking, and they could do that initial phone screen, just trying to get a range. Most people won't come out and ask you, well, what is the dollar amount that you need to make? But they'll ask you kind of what your general range is. And it's okay to provide something there. But if you're going through the interview with an interview panel, don't ask the hiring manager what the compensation range is, because that's very off-putting, especially if you haven't received the job offer. The offer stage is the appropriate time to discuss benefits, compensation, those types of things in totality, because one, it shows that there's an interest for you and that they're wanting to bring you to the organization. If you start a conversation with me around compensation, I'm turned off.
Yeah.
And it's done because you're not really focused on the role. You're not focused on the task. You're not focused on the future. You're focused on getting a bill paid, which means you're desperate for this role. And then the next offer that comes, you're probably going to leave for that because it's a higher dollar amount.
Yeah, you become a commodity and not a valued team member. No, that's a really great point, Tamar. I love that you said that. But I want to talk about the negotiation process because I do think this is a really critical topic to talk about, especially for all students. But one thing that I think has become very readily apparent is the pay gap, especially between men and women in the workplace. And more or less, how can we go about empowering people with more knowledge about when is the right time to negotiate, how much they should be asking for, how to go about asking for that? Because I think having that financial conversation is real and relevant and on the minds of a lot of our students. But, you know, some students either bring it up way too early and it's like, okay, that's a turnoff, or they don't bring it up at all when it actually is time to negotiate. And then there's a pay disparity between them and maybe someone else doing the exact same job as them.
Sure. I apologize. I got something in my throat. I will always say that the offer process is the right time to negotiate, right? Because at that point, the company has laid out its cards on the table. And, you know, for most organizations, I would say they're probably starting midpoint of the range. And so they always leave themselves some negotiation room. But look at the total package. You got to make sure you understand the cost of benefits, the cost of relocation, if you have to move for a job, the relocation package that's potentially being available. Um, what are the incentives, whether you have a bonus opportunity or you have an equity opportunity? And then what is the base rate of pay that they're going to offer? And I would say never immediately sign the offer. And I'm probably speaking against my own interest here of trying to close deals, but take it, do your own Google search. Google is free, right? And so go out, average salary for this role with this experience in this market, and something should pull up.
Yeah.
And if it's within, you know, you know what you need to make to be comfortable or to make a living. So don't ever discount your abilities, but also don't come in that you're going to make $1 million a year and you just graduated, because that's not realistic either unless you create your own company and hit a jackpot.
Sure. Well, and not only that, but also I love what you bring up. But I think the other thing to add is what would you need to earn to live comfortably? Yes. But what is the competitive salary in the space? Don't
Sure.
discount yourself. I think you can point to competitive salaries in the space for evidence for why you should be paid that.
Which is
Oftentimes, especially students where maybe they've gone from maybe minimum wage jobs or lower wage jobs, they've now got their degree, they've now got this piece of paper, this arsenal, this thing that adds a lot to their credibility. And so they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to earn XYZ a year. But
right.
if you do your research, you end up finding out the average person doing your role is making 20, 30K more than what your comfort level salary is. It's like, you should negotiate for that. There's no reason why not to, because I
Right.
mean, you're leaving money on the table and you've got evidence to point to that. You can go back in the negotiating room and say, hey, I'm really grateful for the offer. I'm really excited to start here. I think we can do some amazing things together. I just wanted to point your attention to some other competitive offers for similar roles, for similar types of companies where the salary ranges might have been maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, $30,000 more than what you offered. Is there a way for you, is there flexibility for you to come up to closer to where that range is? Just because I know that's what the average pay is for that type of position.
Sure. I think the concern that probably the students have is that they don't have other offers in hand to fall back on, right?
Yeah.
So there's a fear that's there. I feel like I'm dying. And there's a fear that's there that if they pass this offer up, that they won't find one soon enough, right? Because everyone is, most people are dreading having to pay back student loans, but that process can start very quickly, right? And so your parents are probably giving you some level of a cushion to say, okay, you can stay with me. But most people and most students, they want to be on their own immediately. They want their apartment. They want to be with their own friends. They want to start their own lives. And so those things are important. I would say have a realistic expectation of what the role is, what the market is, and then where you can negotiate. If you're a 1.9 GPA student, you're probably not going to get an offer that a 4.0 student get, right? If you're an associate, you might not get as much as a bachelor's. A bachelor's not as much as a master's, because there are some levels that warrant higher starting salaries and some fields that's going to do that as well. But that doesn't mean discount your talent and your ability. Because if you're in the offer phase, that means that company wants you at their organization. Give them an opportunity to close the deal. Don't just assume that they won't match it, but also don't blow up your salary like $50,000 and expect them to come up to it either. There should be some happy medium. And I would say, I'll tell you what I would do, right? What I would do is try to meet you in the middle. I might not want to go the full 20,000 difference, but I might can get away with 10, because we all have budgets that we have to meet as well. And so figure out how to negotiate, make sure that you're engaging with your talent specialist, your recruiter, so to speak, because they will go back to the hiring manager and to, in my case, to me, right, as the VP, and request an exception to be made on the compensation. I'll have the discussion with the appropriate business leaders, and we'll work on closing the deal.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because if they really want you, they'll make it happen. How
Right.
should a student follow up after the interview? So interviews happen, seems like it went well. What should a student do? What should a student not do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, how should a student follow up? You know, I am still an old school person when it comes to follow up. The art of handwritten notes is over. Do that, because it separates you from everybody else. A quick email is okay too, to say, hey, da da da, but follow up with that personal note. One, you've taken your time out of your day to put pen to paper, to address it to the right person, and to put a stamp on it that came out of your pocket when you can't afford it, right? And you sent it to the organization, and they get that mail, and it's a thank you. That is a lost art in our society, is telling people thank you in a meaningful way in a handwritten note. And so I would say that's the way that I would recommend doing it. It is a differentiator, because most people will send the cursory email. They'll send it back to the recruiter, say, please thank all the hiring people that were there, and I appreciate the time. And then they fail to mention a single thing that occurred in the interview to let you know that you remembered who they were talking about. So that's the other thing I would do. Be specific about what you appreciated from the person that interviewed you. Thank you for your answer on da 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 da. That was great. I appreciate it. Or thank you for your explanation of, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I too champion diversity, and I've worked in organizations that have wada wada. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Right. Do something to make it specific to that individual that you're saying thank you to, and that'll be a differentiator for you.
Love that. That's so. I personally have gotten an offer because I wrote a handwritten note, a handwritten
That's
letter,
awesome.
sent it in the mail. It works, and nobody does it.
Right.
It was in for a pretty competitive. So at the early days of Ambition in Motion, when I was initially drawing a salary, I was working on nights and weekends as a bartender and server, and one of the highest, most nicest restaurant in my town I applied for, and it was competitive. There weren't that many openings, there weren't that many opportunities. I wrote a handwritten letter to the hiring manager, thanking
Oh,
them for
wow.
their time. And he literally called me out. He said this was a very competitive spot. We had a lot of high caliber people that applied with more experiences than you had, but you were the only person to write a handwritten thank you. That's why we hired you.
It makes a difference. It really
It's
does.
huge. And it takes you, because I mean, DeMar, this is something I know I've seen. I don't know if you would agree, but oftentimes when we've got a large applicant pool, we're just looking for ways to weed people out. Most
Exactly.
people sit in the middle of this bell curve. There's some people that blow us away and are amazing. There's some people are just awful. We're like, how the heck do we get to the interview process with them? Most people sit in the middle. And if you want to stand out, you have to find things that you can do that are different.
That's right.
I know writing handwritten letters, you may not have stamps. Go ahead and do it if you really want to differentiate yourself.
Garrett, that is so true. And it is a way to be seen above the rest. And you're right. There is so much, I hate to say the phrase garbage, but there's so much garbage of resumes that are half done, don't apply any of the skill sets to the role, to the position that come in. And we receive, for every job, there's probably 200, 300 resumes to look at. And so the screening time that it takes for a talent acquisition team to go through that, because they will try to use a software to kind of screen them real quickly, which is why ZipRecruiter I like, because it would put the ones that were 100% match up at the top. Some applicant tracking systems will do that for you. And it helps you to identify those people that truly have the experience levels versus those that don't. Um, the worst thing you could do, though, is have misspellings on the resume, run-on sentences, being grammatically incorrect, those types of things, because it shows that you're lazy. It shows that you didn't care, that you're probably in a rush, and that, lastly, you just posted for the job just because it was available, not because your skills match. So please make sure your resume is on point.
That's great. I love that. Let's say we got to the interview process. Let's say we got an offer, but let's say we're waiting on another offer.
Sure.
Or maybe we get two offers.
Yep.
Or maybe we accepted an offer and then we get another offer and we're like, oh crap, what do I do? How should a student handle having multiple offers or receiving one offer while waiting for another? Oh, sorry, real quick, before you answer that question, I just wanted to ask the students a real quick question. Post in the comment section. What do you plan on doing differently to differentiate yourself in your next interview? Post in the comment section. I would love to learn. But yeah, DeMar, back to that question. How should a student handle having multiple offers or receiving one offer while waiting for another?
Garrett, again, that's an excellent question. And it's a real life situation that happens a lot. I will tell you, I've experienced a couple of those at Hyliion where we had someone that accepted a job. The day that she started, she quit because the job offer that she was waiting on came in and it aligned with her passion.
Hmm.
So for me, that's a difficult question to answer because each person's kind of, I don't want to say ethics are different, but every person's situation is different, right? Always be upfront, honest, transparent with the recruiters, because if we're in the running and we're one of two considerations, that's a very different position for us to operate from. Meaning, if you're our lead candidate and we don't want to lose you, that negotiation process is probably going to be a lot easier because you have communicated with us up front and been truthful that you have another offer and you're comparing the two. Now, if you told that to both companies, it could be a race to the top to see who can outspend the other one, depending on the role. There is a cap to each position, right? But be honest and be transparent. The other thing that it's okay to do is ask for additional time to make your decision. So don't feel like just because you received an offer today that you have to respond back that you accept today, especially if you're weighing other options. So be transparent, be truthful with the recruiter, ask for additional time, and then make the decision that best aligns with your future goals. Because if you have a job offer for $80,000 and you have one for $90,000, you can make more money and be miserable. You can make less money and be happy. If the $80,000 is the one that's going to get you to your career goal faster, the smart money is taking the $80,000 job. It is difficult to turn down $10,000 more, but your happiness, your livelihood, and your career won't be sidetracked because you made a mistake at the offer stage.
That's a great point, Damar. I love that. And you know what? One of our past guest speakers on this topic, she shared a really fascinating idea. I'd love to learn your thoughts on this. She had a candidate she loved, she made the offer, and he was like, hey, I like your company, I like your culture, but I've got an offer over here. And he just showed the offer. He said, here's the offer. Can you help me rectify this? Can you help me work with a pros cons list and let me work through this? And ultimately, she was just like, dang, we're like $40,000 off. We are just not even close. Like, I have to be honest, like, this offer is amazing. You should take it. And I would love to stay in touch, because once you gain that experience, we've got more roles in more senior positions that can definitely compensate you at a really high level. And I would love to bring you back in. So the beauty of it is that this candidate was able to maintain his relationship with the company he would have turned down, which oftentimes never happens, because
Right.
if you turn down somebody, it leaves a sour taste in their mouth. But he incorporated her in the hiring process and his decision making, and she objectively was like, I can't even get close to that. This is
I love that.
yeah. What do you think about that,
Yeah,
Tamar?
I love that. Right. Because it's everything that I said earlier: transparency, talking to the recruiter, ask for more time, but being a part of the process gives people what they need to be comfortable about the decision and moving on. And what she did was she validated his future career move. She said, look, we're going to have some roles that'll fit your needs in the future once you get more experience. She knows where he's at now. So guess what that offers in the future is going to be? It's going to be that or higher. Time value of money, positions grow typically 2 to 5% a year. So when that $100,000 offer that she couldn't match, it's going to be higher when he comes back in a better situation, because he'd be further down in his career. So do that. I have asked to match jobs for employees that were being, trying to get siphoned away to other folks. I've been able to match. I've been able to set up different plans. But sometimes I've also not been able to match. So I love that.
Yeah. And at least when you can't, you can, like, both parties can be transparent in the whole process.
That's right.
Damar, this has been great. You've been a wealth of knowledge for our students. I really appreciate that. The final question I have for you is how can is there anything else you'd like to share with our students? How can our students learn more about you? What can students what is there any final imparting wisdom you'd love to impart on our students?
First of all, Garrett, this has been great. I apologize for dealing with some allergies here. I think if I could share any last words, right, it's really about, for the individual student, remember that each interview is your opportunity to showcase your skill set, your unique skill set, the experiences that you've had, and really potential. It's all about the future value of who you're going to be when you find that opportunity and find that ability to be developed within an organization. Be confident in who you are, be authentic, and be well prepared. And I think that is what, in the end, makes the lasting impression on the interviewers, and even those people that are around the room that see you as you walk through the door. There's something about that young lady. There is something about that young man. There is something about that person who ensures that they can be a part of this company culture and enhance it. And I think if you're able to do that, if you can encapsulate all of that with a well-prepared well-written resume that speaks to your skill sets and your potential, then I think you'll be successful.
Great advice, Damar. Thank you for being here. Students, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your night. See you, everybody.
Thank you.